Don't Go in the Woods. This movie is kind of infamous because it made its way onto the Video Nasties list in the UK back in the 80s and was banned from being sold or even viewed for years. Kind of hard to believe now that this movie was ever considered controversial.
Never go in the woods alone.
This movie was shot over the course of about 7 days of principal photography with a couple of days on either end, mostly spent filming murders, and in many cases they were just grabbing people associated with the production or friends or family to pop in and get killed. To save money, they used a camera system for this movie that was not engineered for sync sound recording. Back then, when you would shoot dialogue scenes, you would use what was called a camera blimp. And that was like this camera cozy that would go over the whole rig and cut down on the sound of the mechanical elements of the camera whirring away while you rolled. They didn't use one of those. So none of the production audio was viable. And they had to go in and overdub all of the lines and try to match it as best as they could. They did an okay job. But the sound quality is very unique because of that. It doesn't sound very natural.
This is where I want to live. Marsh. It says marsh. Obviously a small lake now.
This is it. This is really it.
All the mountain ridges in the area meet right here.
Peter!
Most hikers start here and then go down to any one of those 5 canyons.
Huh.
And in fact, actor Frank Millen wasn't available to do the audio looping sessions, so director James Bryan just did his voice.
Cherry, you're the most beautiful thing that ever came into my life.
Mary Gale Arts, who plays Ingrid, she became a pretty successful casting director after this, and she didn't really do any more acting, but she worked for movies like A Nightmare Before Christmas and House of Wax and even Halloween 2. Tom Drury, who plays the killer, was actually a musician and a singer, and you can hear one of his songs in a scene in the deputy's car toward the beginning of the movie. If you look at a scene toward the end, the character of Peter is wearing a shirt that says Boogie Vision on it. And that was an earlier film effort by director James Bryan, which came out in 1977. I don't know, maybe we're ready for the Don't Go in the Woods Boogie Vision extended cinematic universe. This scene here is interesting because it feels like a stylistic choice. The character of Craig is telling a ghost story around the fire, and you only see the other characters listening to the story, and they never cut to Craig. You just hear his voice, and it's actually kind of effective. But it turns out it was just a mistake because they shot his angle, but the film got damaged during developing, and they just didn't have it. So they cut the scene together anyway.
By the blood-starved monster.
Some of these murders were not shot anywhere near the location where the rest of the movie takes place. This scene was shot in a park, and they grabbed it during the editing process to add another kill and to have something exciting happen at the very beginning of the movie. The director, James Bryan, he did a lot of different things in his life. His first couple of films prior to this one were soft-core type films, and one was called Escape to Passion, and then another one in 1970 called The Dirtiest Game, which it's a very evocative title. He also did the aforementioned Boogie Vision, and he did a biker movie called Hell Riders.
Well, what is that?
Oh boy, bikers!
There was one that if you were hanging around video stores in the 80s, you would have seen the cover art, because just about every video store had at least one copy of a movie called The Executioner Part 2.
The Executioner Part 2. He's back. Starring Chris Mitchum and Aldo Ray. Excellent. And introducing Antoine John Matet. He is the judge, he is the jury, he is the executioner. He fought in the heart of Vietnam. Now, he's fighting a war in the streets. He wants to bring crime down and see that it is dead and buried. The Executioner Part 2.
And he made a movie called Lady Street Fighter, which I remember vaguely. But he made a handful of movies around that time, and some of them even made money. You gotta really sort of dig that early 80s slasher, cheapo aesthetic, and you might get a kick out of this movie. I will say that they tried to be creative. They had a week to shoot this feature film, and that is not very much time, especially out in the woods, location shooting, some night shoots. They had to stage, not super elaborate special effects, but some fairly ambitious sequences where the camera is, high above and then down below, and they tried, and truly this movie does get kind of a stigma of crappiness. Critics all pretty much universally hated it when it came out, but I find it a little charming, honestly. The killer, nothing against the actor himself, but the design. He's clearly supposed to be some kind of a mountain man or a feral something, but I think he's wearing rosary beads on his head, right in the heyday of the slasher ripoffs post-Halloween, and coming on the heels of Friday the 13th and all these slasher movies that were seemingly coming out every week around that time. And the one thing they all seem to get, at least, Friday the 13th, by the second one, you got to have a mask, and it should be creepy and, interesting. And with this movie, they decided to put some beads on his face. Odd choice, but I'd say if you like slasher movies from the early 80s and you haven't seen this one, check it out. It's really not that bad.